Hello, and welcome to Calming the Chaos podcast, where we talk with people around the world who can help you find peace in a chaotic world. I'm your host, Tracy Canella, licensed mental health counselor, certified eating disorder specialist, and advanced clinical hypnotherapist. Calming the Chaos podcast is for those who want self-help resources and education. It's not a substitute for counseling or psychotherapy. So if you like what you hear, please subscribe and share it with your friends. Thanks so much for listening. And now, let the chaos begin. In this episode of Calming the Chaos, I am here with Sue Corl, and we're going to be talking about oppressed women around the world and how we can help them to find peace. And I think this applies to many women who aren't in extreme oppression, but even if you're in a relationship where you feel like you're trapped, we are here today to help women move toward inner peace and help them through the struggles of oppression, of any kind of abuse, neglect, and she will help us to have some tips, tools, and techniques to use. Sue is an international women's conference speaker. She's an author, she's a mentor, and she's a missionary. And she has a master's degree in education and also in Christian counseling. She is the founder and director of Crown of Beauty International and served as a missionary for 25 years in Asia and is the author of several books. Welcome, Sue.
Hey, thank you. It's so great to be here today with you, Tracy, and all of you listeners. I'm excited.
Yeah. And just all of the really cool things that you do and the places that you've gone. I mentioned Asia, but you've been so many other places as well in the Middle East. So it would be great just to be able to give our listeners a bit of a history of who you are and how you came to do the work that you're doing right now. We would love to hear that background from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I joined the mission force way back when, right out of college. And after a few years of doing youth work, I moved to Asia, to China. And that was an amazing experience. I thought I'd be there the rest of my life. I practically was. I was there 25 years. And I loved it. But over time, my job became meeting with leaders over there, whether they were missionaries, whether they were local leaders in education, in the church, in the community, whatever. I was meeting with them, and I was really, Tracy, starting to see a theme that these women were barely surviving. And I don't really mean physically in that case, though I go to those places now where that is sometimes the case. But I'm talking about emotionally and spiritually. So therefore affecting them physically, of course, because we know we're holistic beings, right? So it all works together. So as I would get together and I would talk to them, because they want me to come in and kind of evaluate their school environment or their ministry or whatever they were doing. And I'd be like, well, how are you doing? And they said, I'm burnt out. I'm exhausted. I'm depressed. I'm full of anxiety. I can't sleep at night. I'm starting to have a lot of physical manifestations because of it. I'm having huge marital issues. I'm struggling with my kids. I can't handle them. I'm losing my temper, like off the charts, basically rage. They wouldn't name it, but that's what I find out. Beating my kids, whatever, all these things. And they're supposed to be leaders in their community. And so I shifted from the job that I was doing, which was like evaluating, these different educational groups or community groups or church groups, and began to reach out to these leaders, seeing them hurting so much. The other thing that I discovered in that was when I began to talk to them share about your feelings, what are you going through, they'd start sharing a lot of their thinking well, I am blank. I'm so stupid, or I'm a failure. I'm not good enough. Uh, I'm so lonely and I don't think anyone could love me. And then as I pursued that, like, tell me why, well, I don't know. I think I feel I'm just unlovable, or I'm really just no good, or I'm inadequate. And as I pursued that, Tracy, I discovered that really has been a trend in their life since they were a child in most cases. Not in every case, but about 90%. So
Right.
I shifted gears, and that's what I began to do. That's when I began the Crown of Beauty International Ministry. At that point, it wasn't international, but um, when I moved back to the US in 2016, it kind of exploded to other nations inviting me to come in and do trainings like that for women.
And with the women that you just described, their core beliefs, right? Like, I am
Yes.
unworthy, I am not lovable, all of those things. Are you able to work with them individually and as a collective to be
hmm
able to reframe and have people think different things about themselves?
Yeah, good question. So some of them I would meet one on one, or they come in for a weekend, stay for like 3 days, and we work intensively because they were coming from all over the country. Some of them, though, I was doing workshops all over the country. And that was really effective because I trained women to come with me. And after I would do these seminars, we would break up into small groups and I trained these women how to help them. So basically, I had a guide, which I think if I didn't send it to you, Tracy, I'll send it to you. You can send it out to people. It's also on my website. So, what are common lies that we believe about ourselves? That's the first seminar. So, what we do is after I share my own life story, which had lots of chaos and difficulty and trauma, I share that story very openly, Tracy, and people are kind of amazed that I'm that vulnerable, but it helps them. It makes them feel like, oh, okay, maybe I can share this. If Sue's up there, and she's gone through this, and perhaps she'll understand, and the people in my group will understand, and or one on one, And so as they share, what we help them to begin to identify what are those beliefs about self, you know. And it comes out. We start out by sharing what's the struggle, what's going on in your life right now, the painful event we call it, and from that, let's identify what painful emotions you're going through. From there, they'll often say it without even asking, what are you believing about yourself or about your situation or about God or about others? And so I write down all these beliefs as they're rattling these off without even realizing it. And then I read it back to them. Then I ask, hey, let's think about this. Are any of these things, and I'll kind of list them out, have you felt this ever before? And they'll be thinking, well, yeah, actually, well, when did that begin? When do you think you first felt that? They'll be like, gosh, I don't know. I really, since I was young. Well, about when? Can you think of a time you didn't, to kind of pinpoint a little more? Well, I guess I started believing it in middle school. Oh, really? Tell me more about middle school. What was that like? And they'll start sharing it, and you begin to find out where that was rooted. I don't go deep into it. I mean, Tracy, you're a counselor. I really believe in counseling. And if there's been a lot of deep childhood trauma, I think they should talk with a counselor, have more intensive training. But the only reason I do is just to pinpoint, oh, okay, there was a time in my life this began, and I was a child. And so my conclusion as a child was, oh, well, my dad left my mom. That happened to me actually in middle school. And so it must be me. I must be unlovable. I must not be good enough. And you begin to see, wow, it went back to there. Then you take them into the current, present. Let's think about that. Are you really unlovable? Let's talk about that. And they can begin to see a need to reject that. That's just alive and clinging on to this, seeing this as my identity. And if they have the spiritual piece as well, we see that God Himself, our Creator, has said such amazing things about us, right? He says that we're fearfully and wonderfully made, that we're created in His image. We're image bearers. God's amazing. That makes me amazing, right? God is enough. God is beautiful. God is wonderful. God is caring. God is love. Therefore, I am, and we help to begin to replace those lies, which is right a part of a trauma therapy, even where we're just building new neurological pathways, right? Instead of going to that negative side, going to that positive side. But it takes time. It takes training. It takes, the Bible calls it renewing your mind, right? So it takes that continual renewal every day. Might be a few times a day in the beginning, but it'll get easier and easier.
Well, it sounds like what you do is you take the beliefs that people have about themselves and you trace them back to where they started. And then you fast forward to the future or to the present, and you check the facts on them. And is this actually really true? And is it truthful? And is it helping you in your life, right? These beliefs are not helpful. So when you work with a person, you do that cognitive process, it sounds like, correct?
Right. And I like that piece that you added too about, is it helping you? So I would do that more one-on-one. So if in the group somebody's really still struggling, you know what I mean? Then I'll try to set up a one-on-one appointment with them, even if it had to be virtually or whatever. But and it's such a great question to ask, because I think a lot of behaviors that we have, I didn't even mention that. Then we move into what are the behaviors that have resulted that I've used to, I call them protective behaviors. So what are those behaviors I'm using to protect myself so that I won't have to go through that hurt again, or so that I won't have to hear that terrible word spoken to me again. I won't have to feel that again, whatever it is, to begin to identify that. That's when you ask, is this behavior helping you?
Right.
Is it working for you? And it's important, because as long as somebody thinks it's working for them, they're not going to change.
Right.
But it's when they really see that it's not. And sometimes you have to point it out. Sometimes they don't think there's another option.
Right.
I'm stuck in this and there's nothing I can do. For example, now I work in a lot of very impoverished areas. And one of the brothers told me this when I was in Uganda. He said, there's a poverty mentality that is bondage. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he says, it's the sense that I'm poor, our nation's poor, we'll always be poor, there's nothing I can do about it. So eat, drink, and be merry, except they're not merry, right? Eat, drink, and be miserable.
Yeah.
And they feel like there's not an option. And he said, there's always an option. In God, there's always an option. And so even our circumstances may not change. It's true. Although very often what I see is when my mentality changes, when my mental health changes, when I begin to identify myself in a healthier, better way, then I get motivation, I get energy, I begin to see, wow, I was created for a purpose, right? And that purpose is a good life. A purpose is to be helpful for others. That purpose is to reproduce my life into others by passing on these gifts that I've been given by God. And so then you see that I'm not trapped in poverty of hopelessness. I may physically not have a lot, but I can still have an incredibly meaningful, purposeful life as much as anybody else.
Yeah, what you described is that scarcity mentality that happens. I work with eating disorders is my specialty. And so when we talk about people who have struggled with food and eating, there have often been a lack, either
Mm,
from money or food or
mm,
emotional. There's some sort of a lack of a scarcity that people do not believe that they are able to attain their basic needs. So they sort of give up. There is a study done on the Seligman's dogs, and it's
mm.
really super sad when you think about what they did to these dogs. They just continued to shock these dogs in these cages, and they learned helplessness.
Oh,
And that's where that phrase "learned helplessness" comes from. Is from that. There's nothing I can do, so I'm just going to sit here and take the blows. But I think what you might do through both sharing your story with people and also integrating a spirituality and hope, you give people a new way of thinking, and not just about themselves but about their circumstances. So I don't know how much you want to share about, like you said, that you go up on stage and you share your story with some people and they're just like, wow,
mm,
boy, if Sue's going to share this and be this vulnerable. I don't know how much you want to share with our audience, but I'd
sure.
be
I don't
very
mind.
willing to just at least get a taste of what your story is that inspires people
Absolutely.
so much.
Sure. So I was born with an extremely severe cleft palate. So I had no nose, no upper lip, no palate. I had issues in my trachea. It was extreme breathing difficulties. They couldn't figure out how to feed me. So I was having heart issues. My mom, God had prepared her because she had already been a nurse for a few years at a hospital that had the number one cleft palate doctor, plastic surgeon in the country. So they were flying in these babies from all over the country for him to try really experimental at that point procedures. He's actually the one that designed skin grafting. So that goes way back into the 50s. So my mother was an RN with the children, pediatric nurse, and so she was specializing in his babies. And
Mm,
because of that, she was figuring out creative ways to feed them. However, they hadn't had a baby with quite as severe a case as mine, and they just couldn't get food into me. Only thing I can figure is they must not have been able to do like intravenous feeding or whatever
right.
back then for children. I mean, they barely had uh, anesthesia back then for children. And so they told me at 3 weeks, your baby's dying. I think you should take her home so at least she can be with her brothers and her father. And my mom did take me home, but not to die. She had prayed and she really felt in her heart that God said, this baby will live and she's my gift to you. And so she went home. They even paid her to like take care of me, and because she was a nurse from there, and she got my health back. She figured out a way to get food into me by making a mask out of one of my brother's toys and all these other contraptions, and attach it to a bottle that she breastfed into. And so after 3 months, she took me back and demanded the doctor operate. And he thought I would die on the table, but I didn't. And so then that continued. And over 15 years, I had 26 surgeries.
Oh my
So
goodness.
from 0 to 6, I was mostly in the hospital, several surgeries a year. But after that, it was every summer up through 10th grade. So that was bad enough, right? That's pretty hard,
Oh
but
my goodness.
and I can't imagine now that I'm a mother what that was like for my mom. In fact, in my Instagram and everything, this and my podcast, I'm doing a tribute to my mom because she's in her last days, I'm afraid. But
Mm.
she really believed in me and believed what God told her, and so she just persevered and kept me alive. But the hard part, Tracy, came when I think a lot of people listening can identify when I went to school and I really couldn't speak clearly, which is pretty funny now that I'm a public speaker, but praise God.
Funny how life works.
I know, right? And So even a teacher told me I couldn't read with the kids because they couldn't understand me and things like that. And I was teased endlessly every day, mostly from boys. I'm very extroverted, so I managed to get in on the girls' worlds, but the boys were pretty mean. And I started hearing that so often that I was believing it. Pretty soon I thought, I'm ugly, I'm, I'm rejectable, I could never be loved, especially by a man. So my
Mm.
protective behavior, Tracy, was to keep men away from me. So I had a few occasionally boys that were sweet. They're usually the boys that hang out with the girls kind of thing, you know. But I was really fearful that if I'm around them, I know they're just going to cut me to shreds, and I didn't want to hear it. So that's how I moved into my life. And even after I became an adult or a young adult, I still had that protective behavior. So when I went off to college, that wasn't as easy to mm, deal with because, you know, if the weekend comes, everybody goes to the parties and you don't want to be left out, especially me, Miss Extrovert. I'm about 10 for 10 on that chart of extroversion. So I would go, but there's so many men and they're all just trying to hit on women and all that. So how do I deal with it? I drank. And I
Mhm.
just tried to like numb my fears. And it kind of worked, except that then I ended up being taken advantage of and
Mhm.
had an abusive couple abusive situations happen to me.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that kind of rocked my world. And I ended up the second half of college. Uh, I don't know if I committed or recommitted my life to faith, to
Yeah.
Christ. And
Mhm.
again, I told you my mom was a Christian, my dad was not. And my mom had to work every weekend to pay the bills while dad watched us, so we didn't go to church. So I was unfamiliar with that until high school. There was like a
Mm.
group of kids that talked with me that were athletes like me. I was very athletic. That was one thing that really got me through. I'm very pro athletics because that is where I found a lot of security and confidence. And it also built me up as a leader because I was always put in leadership positions and I did very well in athletic career. That was helpful. So eventually I graduate from college and I go into youth work. The only problem with youth work is you work with the guys too. And I loved the guys. I thought they're great, but I was scared of them. And it kind of came across, you know, I came across way too um, aggressive, I guess, or like intimidating, maybe is a better word.
Mhm.
And so I started to realize that because I was struggling to be as kind and loving to the men as I was the women. And I'm like, this isn't okay. You know, I need to love everybody. So I
Mhm.
saw a counselor that was really helpful and began to identify and realize how these things I believed about myself were really interfering in my life. And but I did have trouble, Tracy, changing that belief. You know, it was so ingrained in me. And I can't say that the counselor really helped me in that aspect, like how I viewed myself. She helped me with individual men issues like my dad to forgive them. That was very helpful. Forgiveness was really important piece. But when it came was later, and I was already on the mission field, already in Asia, and it actually came when I realized I was reading the Bible, and I thought, you know, I read what it says, but what I believe is different. And that's not okay because this is God's truth. So I need to believe when it says I'm fearfully and wonderfully made that I really am.
Yeah.
And when I learned about what that meant is when I learned that I'm an image bearer. And that's amazing. And so I began the whole process I just told you I do with others, I started doing to myself and just replacing those lies and writing on my or write on paper on my mirror, I'm beautiful, I'm fearfully, wonderfully made. and beginning to replace that, and then learn to meditate, just meditation on that positive, uh, thought. And it began to change me significantly, and therefore definitely influence my ability to just love the brothers. I had to first forgive the past wounds, but as I did that, I found that freedom. So that's what I share from up front. And it helps women think, wow, yeah, what do I believe about myself that is keeping me from loving others, or from um, being all that I can be, or having confidence, or whatever was being hindered.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that story. It's such a powerful one, and it's sort of from rags to riches, if you want to think about it that
Yeah,
way. And now being able to help so many people in so many different countries, especially women who are oppressed or impoverished, neglected. I don't know how you could maybe tell our audience how you're able to work with. I think I'm just sort of thinking about a basic situation where this happens a lot, where a woman is really feeling oppressed in a relationship. So, say they don't feel very powerful in that relationship, whether it be a romantic relationship or with a family member, but if they really do not perceive themselves to have a whole lot of power, and how you hook in that the higher power with that, because I do want to hear more about how you integrate the spirituality in with women who may not necessarily be Christian women, right? They could be
right.
people who don't believe in any, or not even open to believing any spirituality. But can you speak to how we can move women from this perception of oppression and abuse or neglect and stuckness in maybe even a relationship that doesn't serve them, to be able to use spirituality to transcend and to be able to grow themselves out of that?
Yeah, I would probably start by saying that I would want to understand what that relationship was like. What was that abuse? Because what I don't want to encourage is somebody, talking about, oh, you can be confident, you can be strong in who you are, and then just stay in an abusive relationship. I don't want to do that. So I do want to understand that they're protected. For example, I work with one woman. She was in a farming area, very, very, very countryside in China, and she was being beaten to a pulp. Like,
Mm,
it was terrifying. She had been to the hospital so many times, and the last time her son came to the rescue, kind of, but then the dad just beat him to a pulp
oh
with
my goodness.
rods. And I'm like, okay, we're not going to talk to her now about you can be confident. I'm going to talk to her about getting out of this
Basic
relationship.
needs, right? Like basic
Yeah,
needs
so
being met, medical needs.
I do want to start there. So first I find out, are they in a safe place, and if they are, then I think a lot of times women, we do just need to realize again that, uh, I'm never ashamed to say God is on your side, and if I don't push it, if somebody says, no, I don't believe in God, okay, well, then I'm going to have to work with, but either way, I tell them, but you're still an amazing person. Every single person is created with as an image bearer, whether you believe that or not about God, just know that every person has incredible potential, and you do too. And so as we look back at how that was torn down, that's the first thing we have to do. Okay, we need to see, what were these things that you believed, and we uncover all that. And then we look at their current situation, which is what you're saying, Tracy, is abusive, and that's what's happening again. So we need to teach them a new way of responding, because the old way was to roll over like a dog and just let him get beat,
Exactly.
or try to just keep peace all the time. But then if he drinks too much, boom, that doesn't work either, that kind of thing. So I want to teach them boundaries. I want to teach them that you are worth more. You don't deserve this. Okay. You are valuable. That's one of the four truths we teach in my first seminar is that you're beautiful or fearfully wonderfully made, that you're forgiven. That's important too. That you're valuable and that you're loved. And so I help them see you're a valuable person and you need to be treated like gold. God sees you as gold, that you're a treasure. He says you're like that precious treasure. And that's how you should be treated. And if somebody's not treating you that way, you want to immediately just be telling yourself, I am valuable. I am a treasure. I'm precious. And there's a wonderful verse in the Old Testament says that we are precious and honored and loved by God. And so I can think that of myself. I'm precious, I'm honored, and I'm loved. And if somebody isn't treating me that way, then I just say, if they're sober, if they're drunk, I would not say it then. I would just get away. But if they're sober, in a sober moment, in a better moment, or when they're calm, just say, I want you to know that this is what I'm learning about myself, whether you choose to believe it or not, but I am, okay? I am precious, I'm honored, I'm loved, I'm valuable. And so I just want you to know that when you call me blank, you call me stupid, you call me useless, you call me worthless, that is not true. And if you do that, I will walk away. I will not talk to you. Okay. So I want you to speak to me with words that are valuable. Now that can be scary, I admit, but we have to learn to do that. And if it triggers him, well, then that means we need to separate. We need to put space so that he can learn, look, I will be, and I've had to do that with a friend once, that when she went into a real depression that affected her, but she started treating me really bad. And the reason, and saying just terribly mean things to me. And I said, I'm sorry, but I'm going to leave right now. And I won't come back to this house unless you speak to me with more respect and honor. And you deserve that, and I deserve that. And so fortunately in that case, she did, and it helped.
Wow. It's kind of like what you do is you help people to believe something different and wonderful about themselves. And then you have them actually stand up for their own self-respect. Once they start to believe a different story about themselves, then they can actually stand up for themselves and ask for what they really and truly need and deserve when you think about that.
Let me just add this. That being said, I work in some areas that are really oppressive to women. Some places in the Middle East, even some places like in Southeast Asia and Central Asia. So when it's a culture, the whole culture's that way, it's really tough because a woman doesn't have that choice. Like I help a lot of Afghans. Well, in Afghanistan, they can't just leave the marriage. I mean, they would be destitute. You know what I'm saying? And they'd be outcasts. In India, parts of India, same way. So in this case, and I do find that other than Europe and North America, I don't know anywhere else where people aren't spiritual beings. Seriously, they have some kind of faith. They don't believe that they're separate from this higher power or this, whether they call them God or what.
Universe, source, energy, whatever it is, right?
So what I'm helping them to see is, and I think it really helps if they understand that source you're talking about is personal. That's why God is helpful, because he's personal, right? And that there is someone who does love you, who does value you, who does respect you, who thinks you're amazing, who thinks you're awesome, who forgives you for every wrong that you've done or whatever, who is here for you to cry with you, who weeps when you weep. And this allows them to have this beautiful relationship of where you can be confident, where you can be valuable, where you can be beautiful, where you can be accepted and loved and forgiven, and healed. And that even if on this outside I have to endure for this season, what we do find, Tracy, is often, not always, but often, when a woman changes and she begins to see herself with greater respect, the man changes as well. He begins to see her with more respect.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's sort of the dynamic of the universe, right? The energy dynamic that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So if a person does not respect themselves very much or value themselves very much, then likely they will attract somebody who doesn't value them, and that's where the abuse may begin and end. So what you're saying then is that women can change that cycle simply by believing a different story about themselves. Is that
Mm-hmm.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
And it may or may not push that man away, but another lie is, I have to have him or I'll die. I
Right.
remember learning that in our counseling classes, that we all spiral. We have these spirals. It starts with, oh, this outfit looks terrible on me, to, oh, nobody's going to want to pay attention to me. Well, I'm not really worthy of being paid attention to. Well, I'm all alone.
Yeah.
I don't know
I
if
call it walking down the basement stairs.
Okay,
You
yeah,
can open the basement door and you can walk down the first step, but like people will keep walking down, and
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
exactly what you just
That's it.
described
Yeah, I
there.
always think of it as a spiral, but then at the bottom of the
Mhm.
spiral is, I remember our professor saying, is, I want to die. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking, well, that's rather dramatic. I don't know about that. But, the more I've done counseling over the years, the more I'm like, well, it's kind of true. At the bottom of that is, or I wish I were dead, or, and that's sad, but to realize that, no, we don't need to go there, that we are valuable people, and that we have something wonderful to offer to this world. And
I believe that.
that's,
Mhm.
yeah, and a lot of people don't believe that,
I
you
believe
know.
everybody does in their unique, different ways, and
Mhm.
wow. And so I think too, when we say that people do want to die, and certainly people do take their own lives, I think that a lot though is about that people just really want the pain to end, and
Yeah.
they see that that is the only way. And so presenting to them another way, a life worth living, or even just a different belief system would be so important to
Yes.
help people to understand. It's sort of like a, what do they call it, a paradigm shift, that people don't, they're sort of thinking inside a box, and they really haven't been introduced to a different way or a different possibility of thinking about themselves. So that's sort of what you do. You go in there and you introduce them to a different way.
Yeah, I had a really cool story once where I was in the hill way up in the jungle in Thailand, and there's a group of people that they were refugees originally from Burma, and then called Burma, now Myanmar, and Thailand just stuck them up in the jungle. And so I was taken up in this Jeep, 8 hours up through dirt roads. We get up to all these villages, and so there are tigers and cobras up there. So we had to hire trucks to go pick up all these people. And so they came, we did the conference, and after the man who was sponsoring us, he said, I'm going to take you out to one of the little villages. And so we went, it was nighttime. We went through these dirt roads, and we got there. They don't have electricity, and every single person comes. It's like it's such a tiny little place, that they have built like it's like a church, I guess, and a building, and everybody came. And so the whole time before I spoke, I really sensed God was saying, I want you to share this from your mother's perspective. Like, what was it like for your mother to go through all that? And so it's like, okay. So I shared my story, but with that perspective. And afterwards, there's this very old woman standing at the door, and she called the director to her and to translate for me, and she said, I was planning to kill myself tonight, but then I was told I had to come to this. But my plan was when when this was over, I already had figured out how I was going to end my life. But now that I hear how your mother persevered and endured all that she went through, because my mother also had a blood disease and she was supposed to die. So 7 years through all that I'm going through, 7 years she had blood transfusions every day and was kind of miraculously healed after 7 years. Anyway, so this woman says, I'm not going to die. I know I have a reason. I know I have a purpose. So all of us, y'all, all of us have a purpose. All of us have meaning. In fact, if you don't mind, I will share, there is a Bible verse because it's really cool. And I think everybody will like this. And it says, for we are God's workmanship, or his children, right? We're created to do good works, which he prepared in advance for us to do. So what's that saying? Is that from your birth, he's already infused you with all these amazing, wonderful traits, talents, interests, abilities that he wants to develop those so that you'll be able to live out your given purpose on this earth that's very valuable, that's going to help other people, that makes a difference. We make a difference. And so that's a good message for people to hear.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to sharing this podcast with a bunch of my clients who are some of them are very, very resistant to spirituality. And of course, I don't push that, but I also say that mental health does become easier to manage when you do have some sort of a spiritual outlet. And then there are those who will refuse to believe anything good about themselves, and they're just very, very stuck in those beliefs. So maybe you're going to do some good in helping to kind of chip away. So. Yeah, I would love that.
Because we have amazing potential. You know, Tracy, one of my hospital stays, I think I was about 8. And I got to know this girl the night before a surgery. You used to have to go in the day before. And she was a little fireball, wild woman, right? And she was in a wheelchair, so she had me wheeling her all over. We were being very naughty and going places we shouldn't go. And the next day we had our surgery, and both of us, it was all day. You know, I wouldn't even wake up till midnight. It was about 8-hour surgeries. And so the following day I woke up and I looked over, and there was a curtain drawn, and after a few days they pulled the curtain back, and I discovered that they had amputated both of her legs. And I remember that day, it was a landmark in my life, because I thought, you're an amazing person, and not having legs doesn't change that. You're still wild and crazy and fun and creative and bring joy and life. And I want you to know that. And I want everybody to know that. And it became like my mission, that I'm going to help people to understand that no matter what you look like or what your personality, that you have something amazing to bring to other people.
Wow, what a story. I bet you have a lot of those, and I appreciate you sharing the ones that you did. And if any other ones come up, you just let me know. I do want to highlight your website right now. So the website that Sue is at primarily, which is kind of neat because it's just one sort of centralized location, crownofbeautyinternational.com. You can check it out.
You might have to put a www.crownofbeauty. I'm not sure.
Possibly. It actually works this way because I copied and pasted it. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
And you could put a www in it as well. There's I'm going to go ahead and start and attempt to share my screen.
I have a podcast as well called His Heartbeat.
Yeah, you know, I have a link to that as well. So let me just do this one.
I'm impressed, Tracy. You're pretty techie. Good job.
Can you see? Can you see yourself?
Yeah,
There
that's
you are.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
video has my story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is the, as you can see up top,
Hmm.
www.crownofbeautyinternational.com. And I think you can reach it just by the HTTPS as well. It'll just put in the www. But so this is about a 4-minute video where Sue tells her story. And if we can edit that in, I'll go ahead and do that for
Oh,
sure.
wonderful.
And then I want you to tell us a little bit more about this book. This is the book that you have published back in 2021. And so that's
Hmm.
not that long ago. What is Broken but Undefeated? You want to tell us a little bit about that book?
Sure. Yeah, I went through. There's a book in the Bible called Hebrews, and one of the chapters is all about the heroes, the heroes in the Bible. And I thought somebody needs to do a talk on this sometime. Like I want to be a hero. We're really into that today, aren't we, with
Mm.
COVID and all. And so I did a 1-year study of going through each of these heroes and seeing what's unique. Why are they separately listed? What's unique about their faith? And then I wrote it like a devotional because, some of us, maybe we don't want to pick up a Bible and read it, but we like those little daily excerpts, and it'll help you to see all these different principles that can help you to have more faith in life, more faith in God, more faith in others.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what that one is. And my keynote, I don't know if that's where right if you're talking about a book, but is my book Crown of Beauty, 12-week Bible study. If you are from Christian faith, even if you're not, I have some Muslim friends who are using it right now. But it's a 12-week study that really goes in depth in what I've been talking about, helping you to see who you are, the beautiful things of who you are, the beautiful things of who God is. And also it asks a lot of those questions that are a little challenging, like, why don't I believe I'm valuable? Where does that come from? Why don't I believe that I could be forgiven? Why don't I believe that I'm acceptable? So it goes through a lot of those things. And I think we have seen so much change in people's lives. I usually take a full year to go through it with people, but it is a 12-week. You can go slower. That we've translated it now into 8 languages. And
Wow.
so we use it in the Muslim world in Arabic, and we use it in Bangladesh and Bengali. Now those ones you could write to me, or on our website you'll see the email, and I can send those digitally. We have Chinese, both traditional and simplified, and we just published the Spanish and the French, so that's in there as well. I think I have a men's version called More Than Conquerors, which is like 70% the same. I got some other couple guys to help me with that one.
Nice.
Yeah, so we have other languages out there to help as well.
Yeah, and this is your podcast,
Yes.
and it's called His Heartbeat with Sue Corl. And again, you can access this on the crownofbeautyinternational.com. And then there's a tab that says podcast, as you can see there. And so what do you do on this podcast, Sue? What do you talk about?
So, yeah, we created this. I say we because I have a whole team here that I've raised up to help me. But we've created this to really help women identify what those lies and truths are. And so, it comes in different forms. I have speakers who deal with, for moms, what are those lies and truths, for working women, single women, wives, just, and then breaking down some of those, like when I'm feeling overwhelmed, what's the root of that? Why do I feel that way? Yeah, there you go. And we also have some, you see that one, reaching out to your international neighbors. We really have a heart to help all of us reach out to our neighbors, and especially those that maybe we feel uncomfortable. We believe a lot of lies like, oh, they won't want to talk to me, or I wouldn't know what to say, or So we kind of help even with that. We have one on trauma. I'd like to
Yeah.
get Tracy on here. Um, yeah, so just
Yeah.
a lot of questions that we have that we ask, and we just finished 1 year, so we're on our 53rd episode, 54th coming out this week. Recently, we did one, How to Live Victoriously When You Have Long-Term Illness, and yeah, the scout that is with our community is living a pretty amazing life despite her health. Yeah.
I love this feeling overwhelmed. That could really appeal to a lot of my audience as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I love that. And the trauma, and is church enough? And then there's the illness one right there
Hmm.
too.
Hmm.
Wow. Yeah, it's so neat to be able to know that you are doing so much to help our greater community, for sure. You also have, so this is the link to the podcast. And so you can get to that on the crownofbeautyinternational.com and just click on the podcast page. Sue, you also have a Facebook group, and
Yep.
I'll try and share the screen. And let's see if we can find out the purpose of the Facebook group. A lot of people do have Facebook groups with different purposes, but I don't know what yours
Yeah,
is.
ours is
Certainly does look
mostly a
neat, though.
weekly. Yeah, we do share um, a weekly blog there that different ones of us help to write. I haven't yet developed, like an ongoing, where we share on the Facebook page together. I haven't done that yet. It's
Mhm.
more helping people see what's out there. That bottom picture there, that's this week's podcast. I would love it if y'all listen, even if you hear this, weeks from now. I don't know when this is going up, but that's my mom's. My mom in that picture, and her
Wow.
story. She and I, and our story, what we went through, and the legacy that mom has left, not just with me, but with so many women and men.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, she has been that inspiration. She's the one
Hmm.
that believed in you. She knew you were going to live, and she did everything that she could to keep you alive. And
Yeah.
so this is definitely one that you'd want to listen to, for sure.
Yeah.
And you can get to this if Facebook is your preferred method of social media, you can get through it here, or you can
Mhm.
go to
Or
Sue's website.
Instagram as well. Yeah, I like Instagram.
Yeah, you okay, so yeah, that is true. Sometimes people actually like Instagram a little bit better,
Yeah.
and so guess what? We've got your Instagram
There
up
you
right
go.
here.
You got it all. And I hope to
It's
be putting out a course soon. Our whole conference is recorded professionally, and I know a lot of people can't show up, wherever I'm going. So,
hmm,
yeah, if you get on our website, then when we create these new books, I have a new book coming out called Thrive, How to Thrive, Not Just Survive, which I
okay.
just gave in the Middle East. And so I'm developing it into a book.
Sue, I just really appreciate you being here today, and really just doing what you're doing, the work that you're doing, and just spreading just these. Well, you're calling attention to the lies, and you're helping people to do more truthful and helpful things in the world, believe different things about themselves. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Any things coming up that you'd
Yeah.
like to plug, or any other products and services that you think that our listeners might want to
Well, I just want to
access?
encourage everybody, if you go on our website under resource or more, it just says more, and go on to there. And then one of the resources is this whole list of lies, and then pages of truths. Those are from the Bible, but the lies are really helpful to just begin to identify uh, what I'm believing that's not actually true.
Let's see if we can get to that here.
Yeah, I love your techiness. I
I
need
don't
to
know if
hire
I'll.
somebody like that.
Oh boy. Yeah. Okay. So really what it is, it's under the more tab, and
Hmm.
then there's
Hmm.
resources. So then we've got some episodes here. And do we
Yeah.
just scroll down to see
I
the
don't know.
lives, or?
I normally think it's supposed to be there. Uh,
Huh.
is that it right now?
Yeah,
Under
there's
more.
there's
Oh,
just just some of the episodes
Um,
here.
huh.
Journaling prompts.
All right, let me work on that. We'll get that up for everybody. I apologize. It
Oh,
was
no
there.
worries. No
I
worries
know.
at all. And I would love to be able to just even if you can get that for the show notes, that would be wonderful
Yeah.
because I think that
Yeah, let
everybody
me
could
send that
benefit to
to
do
you.
that.
That'd be great. Okay.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on Calming the Chaos today, Sue. And you take good care and keep doing that work that you're doing. And everybody, remember that Sue can be reached at her website, crownofbeautyinternational.com. You can check her out on Facebook and on Instagram, and check out
Yeah.
her podcast, His
Yes, and I
Heartbeat.
do love to hold conferences. We do 1, 2, or 3 day conferences, and I am not. I I am supported financially through a group called Crew, and so I don't have to charge an arm and a leg to come speak to your community. And I love speaking to communities where women really feel oppressed and struggling, but even for leaders, all these things. So just contact me, and I'd love to come out wherever you are.
Awesome. Connect with Sue. Yes. And then we will hope to see you in the future and all of the endeavors that you do. Take good care again. And thank you for being a guest on Calming the Chaos podcast.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you for listening to Calming the Chaos podcast. If the information in this podcast has been helpful, please consider subscribing and share it with your friends. You can find this podcast on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Music, Spotify, and on YouTube. You can also go to our podcast website at www.calmingthechaospodcast.com, where you can listen to all Calming the Chaos podcasts. Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to sharing my next podcast episode with you. In the meantime, take care.